All right, welcome back to episode number 4 of Going Offsides, brought to you by the Lacrosse Collective. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the rule changes coming to the face-offs in college. We're going to talk about our way too early picks for Division 1, 2, 3, and NAIA champions. And Ryan, why don't you get us started off with your pick for D1?
Well, my friend, it is very, very early. Obviously, we know that it's not even July 1st yet, but the transfer portal has kind of taken shape, and we know that certain guys have found their landing spots, at least for the higher end Division I schools. So you kind of have an idea of what teams are going to look like going into the fall, and hopefully there is a fall, but definitely in the spring. One of the groups, and you'll kind of see it throughout my picks for across Division 1, 2, and 3. I'm kind of big on teams playing with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, playing with a little something to prove. So my early pick for 2021 is going to be the Syracuse Orange. I think their 2020 season obviously was cut short, and they were trending very, very up when the season ended. I mean, they had some really big wins. They were really starting to mesh together. I think the addition of Pat March as their offensive coordinator really gave them the shot in the arm that they really needed. And it really kind of returned them to their roots, even though he's not a Syracuse guy. It looked like those guys were really starting to have fun playing together, and it looked like it was like starting to look like the Syracuse of old. I know it's probably not the popular pick, and people really aren't thinking too much, because there is another team that I'm sure my co-host is gonna talk about that is the all too early favorite, but I'm going to go with Syracuse. I think they returned the majority of their guys. They got some really good seniors coming back for a fifth year. They got some big transfers coming in. I mean, even though it was sad to see Furman drop their program, but I mean, for Syracuse to pick up a really good poll from them and to pick up their leading scorer as a freshman and have that guy, have 4 years of eligibility. I think they're reloading. They got some really good guys, and I think it's just enough new guys to really kind of fill in some spots for them, where it's not going to be like some other schools where they're bringing in all this talent. They've had a lot of talent, and they have to kind of figure out where these guys are going to fit in. And those guys up at Cuse, man, they're crazy. They're nuts. There's a lot of tradition there, and it's one of those programs where it's either you're on board or you're out. So I'm big on Syracuse. I think Syracuse returns to championship weekend, and I think they take the whole thing in 2021. And I think it's going to be another ring for Syracuse. How about you, my friend? Who's your pick for Division One?
I mean, easiest pick I can think of is Duke. You have, in my opinion, the greatest, if not top 3 greatest lacrosse coaches of all time in Coach Danowski. You've got all of these guys coming back.
Where's he from again?
Yeah, Long Island. I get it.
Okay. Just checking.
Yeah.
For me, though.
I'm sure I think he was a bigger fan of your brothers than you anyway, right?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
Probably. Anyway, they have a ton of talent coming back. They have a little guy named Michael Sowers coming in. I don't know if anyone's heard of him, but he's pretty good. Early favorite to win the Twarton. Definitely was on his way to win it this year and take Princeton back to the tournament for the first time in years. They have a great poll coming in from Syracuse, so it must not have been that great at Cuse because they're leaving for Duke. But either way, I have Duke as my early favorite, and I know that's not really a tough pick, but it's my pick.
Well, if there's anybody that can get all that talent to kind of gel, I definitely think it's Dino. And also too, it doesn't hurt that they have the number 1 recruit in the country coming into them as well. Having seen him play up close and personal, not in club lacrosse, but in actual high school lacrosse and playing, at St. Anthony's, Brennan O'Neill is the real deal. He's going to be on the field right away. I think when people see him and the nation is really really kind of, introduced to him, I think he's going to be an absolute monster. And I think, he's watching him. It reminds me of watching John Grant Jr., the way he plays and his style of play. And I think it just factors in that he's a lefty as well, but he's a big, solid kid, and plays that kind of Canadian field, that box field game. He's just a stud, and it also helps too that they got one of the best face-off kids in the country going there too. So they're not hurting down at Duke.
No.
You can't beat the weather, you can't beat the scenery, you can't beat the education. So they're going to be right there in the thick of it. But who knows, man? That's why you play the games. So it's they have to go through that ACC schedule, and I mean, they're going to see Syracuse, and and I don't know who plays at home, this year, but if it's in the Dome, man, that place is going to be a rocking.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's such thing as too much depth, but Duke might have too much depth on offense. They're going to have to get kind of creative to get enough guys, enough reps.
Yeah,
but that's a luxury we all wish we had. All right, D2. I know we're in agreement on this pick, but why don't you go ahead and introduce?
Well, to kind of continue on with my trend, teams with something to prove. I truly think that they were going to be in the thick of things this year, just based off of their early season success. But great coaching staff, great location, great facility. I mean, it is, having played there and been in that environment, it is turning into a big time lacrosse school. They've got a lot of great things going for them, and they've got arguably the best two kids in Division II coming back. My pick for Division II is it's gonna be them coming out and winning their first national championship. It's gonna be the Lenoir-Rhyne Bears. Having seen them kind of grow from infancy to where they are now, I think it's just a matter of time. I thought this year they were going to be able to make that run and maybe get to championship weekend, and who knows what would have happened. But I think this year in 2021, it's going to be their year. I think they're going to be a really tough team to beat. They traditionally play a tough schedule. So it really depends on kind of how things go. But I think that they're going to be the team in the SAC conference, and the SAC this year gets, I think it becomes the toughest conference in Division II, because you add Limestone to an already overflowing conference. I mean, in the SAC, you have LR, you have Wingate, you have Queens. Now you add Limestone. Catawba's always very good. Coker was having, a really good year, and they were going to be a tough team to beat. And, obviously you have my former school, Lincoln Memorial and Tusculum, and some of those other schools. I mean, Newberry's doing a really good job with getting their program off the ground. Mars Hill's obviously a tough school too, but there's a lot of good lacrosse down there. I think that that's probably the toughest conference from top to bottom. I mean, there's 5 or 6 teams in there that can beat anybody on any given day. So my pick is going to be Lenoir-Rhyne.
Yeah, I mean, they might have actually benefited from this whole half a season situation. You think about it, it's a young team, had very little experience postseason. They come out, they beat Limestone, they beat Adelphi. I'd like to think that those wins would carry on and have a really long season, but that might have taken a lot out of them early. So now, if you want to look at it with a silver lining, they've beaten 2 big names. They have the experience. They know what it's like to beat those teams. And they go into 2020, 2021 with that experience, knowing how to beat a big program, a big name, and maybe this is the year where they can put it all together.
Well, I think too is like one thing that I've always been impressed with them is like they're tough. Like that is a tough team. When you go out there and play them, you know that you're going to be in for a battle. And not to say it again, but their coach is from Long Island, not a big deal. But all kidding aside, he Coach Paradine's a great coach, but he has those guys ready to play every single game. Doesn't let them lose focus or anything like that. And I think it's going to be a great year for them.
Absolutely. And one thing, having watched them play Limestone, is they just never backed down. Every time Limestone answered, there came Lenoir-Rhyne with another goal, another big play. They just really didn't play scared. They played a relentless style, a fearless style of lacrosse, and it was very, very fun to see. So
Yeah.
moving on to D3, again, real tough pick for me to make, but with all the unknowns, I have to just go with Berkman at Salisbury. It's just if I'm a betting man, which I am, I just want to go with the closest thing to a sure thing there is from year in and year out. I mean, there's plenty of other great teams that have made runs, but the team that you can count on to make it pretty deep every year and go on historic runs is Salisbury.
Death, taxes, Seagulls playing on championship weekend.
Exactly. Now, for your very, very out of the picture, totally wild off the cuff pick, you pick.
I picked Tufts. I think that once again they were the team that was trending upward the most in Division Three. It's really tough for me because I'm such a huge fan of Coach Kuhn up at RIT. I think at some point they're going to break through because
No
they
relation.
just no relation. I say my last name Kuhn, but it's no big deal.
People are confused.
People are confused, but I'm a huge fan of what they're doing up there. He's got a great thing going up there, but from my standpoint, you can't deny what Tufts is putting on the field year in and year out. And I thought that this year was the year that they were going to win the national championship again, but obviously we know what happened. But I think that with what they have returning, with kind of the situation that unfolded this season, they return a ton of guys coming into next year, and obviously they recruit really, really well. I think it's going to be Tufts winning the national championship. They play such a fun style of lacrosse. They're in your face. They're pressuring you all over the field. They're getting up and down. I mean, really, that's the place where the resurgence of actually, I'm not going to say the resurgence, but when people started to really kind of take notice and realize that everybody was schools were playing fast lacrosse again, people looked at Tufts. Now I will say Salisbury's been playing fast since day one, but just based on the way lacrosse is from a regional standpoint, the schools from the north get more press than the teams from the south. So, but my pick is it's going to be Tufts. I think the Jumbos are going to win. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Tufts Salisbury in the final game.
I mean, I don't think anybody would hate that. That'd be a huge game. That'd be an entertaining game no matter what. All right, moving on. NAIA, not as well known, but you and I know him well.
Mm-hmm.
Your pick for NAIA National Championship tournament champions.
I think there's going to be a number of reasons as to why I think that this team's going to do it. I mean, really, you could pick, anybody in the top three in this conference. I think it's, and I don't know if you agree with me, Coach, but I think this is the best conference in the NAIA. So I just kind of threw a dart at the dartboard and it landed on this team. I think they return a lot. They have some key transfers coming in, and I think they probably have a sour taste in their mouth from how their season ended. I think too, probably the hiccup that got them early in the season, probably losing a game that they probably thought they should have won, definitely kind of refocused the team. And I think that'll help them, that learning lesson will help them going into 2021. I think it's going to be the Indiana Tech Warriors.
I mean, it's a good pick, no doubt about it. It's kind of like picking Salisbury or Tufts. You're picking a team it's continuously in the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry about it. The only issue becomes the WAC is, if not the best, certainly the deepest conference in the NAIA. You have sometimes 4 or 5 teams ranked receiving votes at a time. Personally, they're not my choice to come out of the WAC this upcoming season. I'd lean towards Lawrence Tech, but
would you agree there's going to be multiple teams going to the NAIA national tournament from that conference?
I think 3 is the most you can get anymore with the way that the conferences have aligned. I think Indiana Tech certainly has a chance at one of those 3, and then as you know, they can make a run. I'm going with for national champion, the closest thing to a sure thing in the NAIA. Reinhardt going for a 4-peat. Not so much because they win every year, but they have pretty much every single kid coming back. They've got most of the seniors from last year coming back for fifth years. They've got transfers coming in from other NAIA schools. I know they've been talking to some other transfers from other divisions as well. So I just think John Snow, great name, but also great program, and he's not from Long Island.
No comment.
Anyway,
I think they're going to obviously be in the thick of things. I mean, it's tough when you have that many guys coming back, but sometimes too much success, it can bite you in the butt at some point. At some point somebody's going to catch them. It really just depends on who's playing the best lacrosse at that time. Like you've seen so many times. You saw it when, UMass went undefeated all those years ago and then lost to Colgate in the first round of the NCAA tournament. You've seen it when some of these teams that have had great regular seasons and started the tournament, they kind of faltered down the stretch. It's going to be, especially now that the NAIA is growing and everybody is starting to get better and there's kind of more parity there within, the regular season and the conference tournaments. It really is going to, be a war of attrition. Like who's going to be able to stay healthy, who's going to be able to stay mentally fresh to make that run into, early May.
All right, now that we've talked about our proposed champions at each level, why don't we pick our sleeper picks for who's going to make the biggest splash this year in each division?
Well, I'm not sure if I can do this, but I'm going to do it, and nobody's going to stop me. I actually have two. One is going to be the Johns Hopkins Blue Jays. I kind of have mixed feelings about how Coach Petramala was let go. I'm such a huge Petramala fan. I think he's obviously one of the best coaches of all time, but that's not what we're talking about. I think a lot of times, like how we've discussed, with that turnover at that position, whoever came in was going to have to make a big splash. And congrats to Coach Milliman. He has definitely won the summer in terms of that, between his hirings, for staff members and what he's kind of done from a recruiting standpoint. He's got the makings to really make a run with that team. I think I don't necessarily know if they're going to get to championship weekend, but I definitely think that they're going to make a deep run, and they could make it to championship weekend. Between hiring probably one of the obviously he's one of the greatest players of all time, and John Grant Jr. to run the offense. He's also a really accomplished coach. I mean, a lot of people, they look at him that he's 1 or 2 years out at Air Force. He won back-to-back state championships at Valor High School in Colorado. So you don't do that. I don't care what level, where you're at. You don't win championships like that if you're not a great coach. So he is a phenomenal coach, and I think he's a guy that kids are going to want to play for. I think that Canadian pipeline is going to open up even more, and they're going to get some really good players there, and he's going to be able to really kind of improve a lot of the players that are already there. And then also, too, I think their defense, that's where you're going to see the biggest jump. They've always had defensive talent, but bringing in Coach Coster from UMBC, UMBC doesn't have the resources that Hopkins has. But Coach Coster did a great job with that team. I think you're going to see the defense of Johns Hopkins make a tremendous jump this year. So I think they're going to be my sleeper pick overall. But don't count out. I think this team did a great job with getting some key transfers in over the summer, and they're returning one of the best attackmen in the country. I think you're going to see a resurgent year from the Hofstra Pride. I don't think they're not going to have a championship weekend run, but they're going to be. I think they're going to have a really good shot at winning their conference, and I really think that they're going to have an opportunity to make a run in the NCAA tournament. Really, like I said, it depends on kind of how things go towards the end of the year and who can win that war of attrition. But I think that between those two teams, you're going to see. You're going to see a big jump as compared to what we've seen in the past couple of years.
I'm going to keep it real simple for everybody. I could pick Hopkins. I wanted to. I agree. The coaches, I'm not going to say that it's a better coaching staff by any means, but it certainly is a very exciting coaching staff. I don't even want to say young, because John Grant Jr. is not young, but in terms of college coaching experience, he's a young coach.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has injected a lot of energy into recruiting and excitement and all of those things. So Hopkins is obviously a good choice. I think my sleeper pick is going to be Michigan because I've been, and a lot of people have been just waiting for that corner to completely turn, for the lid to be blown off the top there. And I think that they have the talent and the recruits to do it. I think the coaching staff is able to do it. And I think that this is the year where they finally, they surprise more than one team in the Big Ten, which has become quickly possibly the deepest outside of the ACC, one of the deepest conferences in college lacrosse.
Okay, there you go. I don't disagree with you on that.
All right, D2. I mean, you already picked a little bit of a sleeper as your champion, but if you had to pick one more.
The Florida Southern Moccasins. Coach Ward is doing a tremendous job with that group. They've always kind of been in the mix. I think this is the year they get it over the top. They've got some really good talent coming in. They've got some really great talent returning. He's a great coach. He always gets his guys to play hard. I think for them it's just always tough just to get out of that conference. And I think if they can do that, they have every opportunity to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. That's my pick, and I'm sticking to it.
Yep, and they brought back a great defensive coach and Coach Lubbs all the way back down to Florida. So I think his presence has been noticeable, and I think you're right. I think that team's going to do great things. I'm going to go in a different direction. I'm going to go Midwest, and I'm going to pick UIndy. Not, if you're in the Midwest or if you're really into D2 lacrosse, that name isn't new to you, but I do think.
Is a Final Four team really a sleeper pick?
I mean,
I'm kidding.
If you talk to someone from Long Island, do they think of UIndy as a potential champion? I don't think so. I don't think they even. I don't think they think about them.
Well, I think you're right in terms of that being a sleeper. I think they just take another step towards consistency and legitimacy as a program. I mean, he's doing a wonderful job there.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. Coach Stocks, right?
Yeah, Coach Greg Stocks.
Yeah, and the other way I look at it too is I think a lot of people might see that Final Four as a blip on the radar. One of those teams that makes a run 1 year and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's like that at all. I think people are going to have to get used to seeing UIndy as a perennial power in D2 lacrosse. And the fact that they're from the Midwest and that they're a very young program, that program didn't even exist too long ago. The fact that they've achieved so much so soon, and I think the real surprise is going to be their ability to sustain that success.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
All right, moving on to D3.
Illinois Wesleyan. I
love the pick. You threw me off there.
Wesleyan. I think that they're poised for a breakout. Not that they actually, I'm sorry, this could be between two teams, Illinois Wesleyan and Elmhurst. Always two teams, because I'm going to be honest with you. I love what Coach Morrell's doing at Elmhurst.
Before we get any further, I'd like to take a second to talk about our sponsor, Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's completely free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, which is what we do every day. Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
What Coach Morrell's doing over there, I think that location is awesome, and they've slowly, been building towards something big, and he's bringing in great recruiting classes. Those guys are buying into everything that he's doing. So I think that they have.
How about you quit BSing me and just pick one team? Who's going to win that game? Elmhurst versus IWU. Who wins that game?
I think IWU wins the first game, and Elmhurst wins the conference championship and gets the AQ.
Fair. I like it. Put you on the spot. Yeah, I'm going to go a different direction, keeping it in the Midwest. I'm going to go with Hope College.
Okay.
They're not new to the tournament. They won their conference this year. Good, tough Midwest conference. They happen to have beaten Elmhurst this year 18-8. So I
Mhm.
know that they have the chops to do this.
Yeah.
And what's absolutely insane, and I wish I could swear to really emphasize this, but what's absolutely insane is that Coach Shanhouse up at Hope is still a full-time high school English teacher while taking his team to the NCAA tournament. And we're going to have him on in a couple weeks, but I can't tell you how impressive that is to be able to run a program the way that he runs it and be able to take your team to the tournament after working a 40-hour week as a teacher is absolutely insane. But I digress. They have the talent. They have the experience now. The recruiting is insane. I mean, he gets a lot of guys out of the Chicago area that come up the coast to Grand Rapids. It's literally that campus is a country club. I'm not kidding. It is a smaller Christian version of High Point, and it's on Lake Michigan, so it's absolutely insane. So, and for people that don't know, Grand Rapids is kind of a little bit of a hub of talent in the Midwest for lacrosse, and it's been that way for years. So he does a great job of keeping those kids at home. They had great success this year, even though he lost his son, the starting goalie for 4 years, as a grad transfer to Michigan. So
Insane.
that tells you about the depth that they've had there for a little bit. But moving on to the NAIA, why don't we just pick one sleeper together? You picked Indiana Tech as your champion. I picked Reinhardt. The sleeper pick I'm going to give everybody is Columbia College. They beat Indiana Tech earlier in the season. If you know anything about NAIA lacrosse, you weren't really surprised that they were good. You might have been surprised by how good they were.
Mm-hmm.
And they lose almost nobody. So I am really high on the Cougars. I've been high on them since day one. I put them in as like number 9 or 10 in my preseason poll last year. And I definitely think that's a team that could make a tournament appearance already.
I don't disagree with you. I think, it's those trips it's such a tough place to play. So I think that they have that on their side. If you're going out there to play them, it's going to be a dogfight. It's going to be hard for any team to do that. And then likewise, if and they've done a great job with it. If they can manage the ups and downs of those road trips, because you know how NAIA goes. Like you're playing 2 games in 3 days. If they can handle that and they can do some good things, I could see them making the NAIA tournament and maybe doing some damage to some people.
Yeah, they've definitely stepped it up. Their conference, the usual powerhouses in their conference have taken a little bit of a step back, and they've definitely taken a step forward. So don't be surprised to see the Cougars when it comes time for the tournament.
You got it. I agree with you.
All right, moving on to our next topic, face-off rule changes in NCAA lacrosse. So for those who don't know, they've eliminated, or they're proposing to eliminate, the motorcycle grip, which is the 2 overhand grip, which many face-off specialists like to use. They're also eliminating the knee-down stance, which means they are moving to what a lot of specialists are calling SNG, which stands for standing neutral grip, which is exactly what it sounds like. You have one hand over, one hand under, and you're standing. And we had a great interview with Brandon Davenport, former Detroit Titan face-off specialist, former Ohio Machine face-off specialist, and most recently served as the Culver Academy and mentored probably one of the best face-off guys in the country, who is now going to be playing at Denver. So stay tuned for that interview. All right, so first of all, with the new proposed face-off rules, which was, for anyone that doesn't know, standing, aka no knee down anymore, and then a neutral grip, so no motorcycle grip anymore. What are your first impressions of that proposed rule change?
So I like it, to be honest with you. Obviously, I love face-offs, but I am not a face-off purist. So I'm in for whatever's going to grow the game. So as a lacrosse community, I think that we should all have the same goal of making lacrosse more mainstream. And if that means changing the face-offs around to make first-time viewers of lacrosse understand it better and make it more of a fun thing to watch, then I'm all for it. It's definitely going to change the game quite a bit. But I think it's going to make it faster, and I think it's going to make it more enjoyable to watch.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, based on, how face-offs used to be, everyone's been saying that this is going to create more of a 90s feel to how face-offs are. It's almost like you have guys like Kyle Harrison that are true midfielders, two-way midfielders that also take face-offs. A little bit less specialization needed to compete at a face-off with the new format.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's going to completely eradicate face-off guys, but I do think that if you've got a team and you've got a face-off guy that's winning 65% of your face-offs, but you have a defensive midi who's really great at keeping the ball on the ground, who's super athletic, who only wins 60% of the face-offs, I'd probably, put a defensive midi out there who's just going to keep the ball on the ground, knowing that we don't have to change guys, especially if there's a shot clock involved. You want to, keep your guys in the field as long as you can, and if you don't have a face-off guy, it's going to make things a lot quicker and smoother, especially if I have a really good athletic defensive midi that's facing off against a true Fogo. If that Fogo picks up the ball, he's probably going to have a tough time against a really skilled D midi.
Yeah, so we're forcing, with the rule changes, we're either forcing a true Fogo, like what we think of in the traditional sense, a guy that isn't as skilled outside of the actual clamp or whatever move he uses, to be a little bit more well-rounded if they're going to be effective still.
Yep, exactly. Yep, and you're going to have to be – there's going to be just such a huge emphasis on how you pick up ground balls, where if you are more of a technical face-off guy that isn't getting dirty on ground balls, I don't see really a place for you in face-offs. There's just going to be too many ground balls where you have to get in dirty and get those dirty ground balls and fight for the ball. I just don't think that there's going to be a guy who's on a standing neutral grip going to go out and win 85% of the clamps clean and move it forward and be alone picking up those face-offs. I think it's going to turn it into a dirtier ground ball.
Okay. And then how does this affect how face-off guys train? I mean, you kind of hit on it. Are we looking at guys focusing a little bit less on the technical side of the actual face-off and more on basically post-clamp, what happens, the ground ball, playing defensively, those types of things?
Yep. Yeah, I think it's going to be really important for those face-off guys to definitely be more comfortable with the ball on their stick and fighting for ground balls. But, to be an elite face-off guy with the knee down, you could practice at your house and do face-offs by yourself and learn all your moves and be a really elite face-off guy. To do a standing neutral grip, to be elite at standing neutral grip, you can't just practice at your house. I think it's going to be really important to do live face-offs to a ground ball, where you're going to get better with taking the standing neutral grip face-off and then picking up that ground ball. So, my standing neutral grip moves, I probably have, 6, 7, 8 moves, and almost all of them require me to utilize the other player's stick to get the ball out. Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult for me to practice my standing neutral grip moves by myself. Now, right. You can do a true plunger and get that ball out quickly and pinch and pop it out real quick. But that's with the standing neutral grip, that's only really going to be, I think, for the elite of the elite with the hand speed. Like if you're really quick, the kid, Alex Dapkis, who I coached at Culver, who's at Denver now, has such elite hand speed. He's so quick. I think he's still going to be able to win the majority of his faceoffs just pinching it real quick and moving it forward. For the rest of us that don't have those freakishly quick hands, I think it's going to be important for you to train against other people to have a bunch of different moves, because they're going to get dirty and you have to be able to counter and get underneath guys' sticks to get that ball out to force a ground ball. So I think there's going to be a huge importance on taking live face-offs rather than just practicing on your own. It's going to be important to practice on your own. I just think there's a huge emphasis on taking live face-offs on standing neutral grip all the way out to like a finished ground ball.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me, I don't know if it was out of like just a coincidence or not, or the fact that, your senior year at Detroit, I'm not sure we had a lot of guys that were pure moto grip, just hard clampers. But
Right.
we already did a lot of those drills. We focused a lot, if you remember, on a lot of drills that focused on the GB, losing the
Yep.
face off, getting the GB, getting the ball in the stick and putting it where you need to put it to get the ball up. It was a lot more than just win the clamp and hopefully, just pinch and pop out of the back of your stick. That was pretty rare.
Exactly.
I think we were accidentally ahead of the time on that one. But
I think we were. You're absolutely right. I think that's why it was it was important that you and I came up to the realization that I could be effective on the wings as well. So putting face-off guys on wings, athletic face-off guys on wings that are good at ground balls, because I knew where that ball was going to pop out before other wing guys did, because I took face-off and I knew the tendencies of our other face-off guys and where that ball was going to go, and I could get a step on these guys before anyone else. And I think
you could
with these new rules, with these new rules, it's going to be really important to have really effective wing play. I don't think that there's going to be a ton of wing guys physically picking up the ball, because those days of like pinching the ball in between your legs and throwing it behind is those are few and far between. But it's going to be super important for a wing guy to set up his stance and set up on the line in the spot where he can push a guy out of the way to give your face-off guy as much space as possible for him to pick up the ball on his own.
Okay. And then let me throw a curveball at you. Do you think that, given the new kind of the proposed rules, do you think we see a rise in LSMs taking draws?
That's a good question. I think we will see a rise in LSMs. I think you're going to see LSMs that are going to be better at picking up ground balls, really athletic LSMs that are out there. The only tricky thing with an LSM is if you get that ball up, you're a bit vulnerable with such a long stick that it's more likely that someone could get a cause turnover on you. I do think there's going to be more long stick middies taking face off. Me personally, I think that there's going to be a ton of really athletic defensive middies that are going to take face-offs, just because the fact that teaching someone how to take a knee down face-off is pretty hard. There's a lot of technical moves. If you don't get it, you kind of just don't get it. Like, it takes hours and hours of training, where I could teach a really athletic defensive midi how to take a standing neutral grip face-off and how to keep that ball on the ground in a couple hours. So I think that that's going to be there's just going to be a ton of super athletic defensive players that are going to be taking face-offs, knowing that you don't have to change players. They're going to keep the ball on the ground and they're going to pick up ground balls. So I think that will be long stick middies. I think there'll be a ton of defensive middies that are now going to get in the mix. The only thing with that long stick midi, I think, is if they pick up that ball, they're going to be a little bit vulnerable with such a long stick.
Yeah, I could definitely see an LSM playing more of the role of, like you said, if you have a guy with an elite hand speed that is going to be able to still get control of the ball pretty quickly and then make a move, just the LSM's ability to keep that ball on the ground longer or tie that guy up and just allow the wings to become more of a factor.
Yep, exactly. Agreed.
All right, well, perfect. Well, thanks for your insight, Brandon. We'll be sure to have you on the show again.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
What a great interview that was with Brandon Davenport, learning a little bit more about how the proposed face-off rule changes will affect the game. Ryan, we talked a little bit off the show about this, but how do you see and what are your thoughts on how this is going to affect the game moving forward?
Well, I think it's going to affect the game, but I don't think it's going to be as dramatic as everybody thinks. I think the dominant face-off guys are gonna stay dominant because, like always, they're masters at their crafts. They're gonna stay ahead of the curve and obviously create new and improved ways to be great at their position. So I think you're gonna see obviously it's gonna be different looking at a new grip and obviously people standing up, but I think that it's definitely going to be, once kind of everything has subsided in terms of people voicing their opinions, you're going to see kind of more of the same. Like TD Ierlan's still going to be the best face-off guy in the country. Teams are still going to be trying to game plan on ways to stop TD Ierlan. It's just one of those things where I think it's going to create more opportunities for two-way middies to become prevalent again in the sport of lacrosse. I think that you might see some people not necessarily be as specialized when it comes to face-offs, but overall, I think the game is going to stay the same. I think you might see the game speed up a little bit, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think the great face-off men and the face-off trainers out there are already putting in new ways to help their guys improve at the position and be ready for those changes. So I think you're going to see more of the same. I think that it's going to be different at first, but I think over time it'll level out and you're going to kind of see more of the same.
Yeah, I think like we discussed in the interview with Brandon, I think we're going to see a focus on having a more well-rounded face-off specialist that is certainly able to play the ground ball a little bit more. You look at guys in the PLL, like for Chrome, he does a great job winning the clamp, but he sometimes struggles with that post-clamp GB. Obviously, they're not changing rules, but at the college level, you see that quite often, especially when you don't have that elite face-off guy. But you know what? The elite face-off guys are elite for many reasons, and having a motorcycle grip isn't necessarily one. Having a knee-down stance isn't necessarily one. It's having elite hand speed. It's understanding the mechanics and body positioning and leverage. So those guys will be fine. I think what we'll definitely see more of is like we discussed, some creativity from the coach's side. Maybe for a fact you don't have a great face-off guy. Maybe you're a team that always is slightly under 50%. Maybe you do throw out more LSMs and see what that does, what kind of havoc that does. And you throw out your LSM and two D mids and all of a sudden, or two-way mids, and all of a sudden you don't really have to take time to sub off. And in the shot clock era, that might not be a bad thing. So I think you'll see that kind of creativity and not having to, or heck, throw on 3 two-way mids.
Yep.
And roll the dice and say, these are my 3 best GB guys, and maybe you don't have to even sub off at all on, you just have a quick transition into offense. So there's a lot of ways to look at this. It was nice to hear from Brandon, who is a face-off guy his whole life, but isn't a face-off purist. He's open to seeing things change, and it was great having him on the show.
What I will say is that for the coaches that think that this is gonna help solve their problems, and that we're wanted change at the face-off because you didn't recruit a guy who is as good as some of the other guys that you're facing, you're still gonna have those problems. So you have to get creative. I think that it's just. The great face-off men are going to be the great face-off men. I think you're going to see a lot of creative coaching, which is a great thing. I think, a lot of coaches have a lot more tricks in their bag that they don't necessarily show us. So I think that some of these rule changes, it's going to make the game a lot more fun to watch. It was already fun to watch, but I think you're going to see a lot of creative stuff that, you haven't seen necessarily before. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be interesting, but so that's my take on it.
Yeah, for the younger guys out there that didn't get to watch a lot of 90s, early 2000s lacrosse, you're gonna see what it was about. It was a lot of two-way players. It was a lot of GBs off the draw. It wasn't a lot of pinch and pop. It wasn't a lot of moves. It was pretty basic, and it created a pretty exciting game. But I think moving forward, we'll see how it plays out. And at the end of the day, it's nothing's permanent, as we know, with the NCAA and the face-off rules. They're going to change again next year. I guarantee it. That's it for another episode of Going Offsides, presented by the Lacrosse Collective. Please follow us at Lax Collective on Twitter, or go to our website, thelacrossecollective.com. Stay tuned for more episodes.